Hello there. Very good morning and welcome to Recount Watch on this Sunday morning. I'm your host, Eddie Lane, and of course, I'm joined this morning by Sanjeev Datadin, attorney at law, and of course, candidate of the People's Progressive Party. Sanjeev, good morning and welcome to the program.
Good morning, Ed. Good morning to you. Good morning to all the listeners.
Today is expected to be the final day of the national recount of ballots cast on March 2nd, 2020. It has been quite a long road, a road with lots of ups and downs, if you want to call it, during this process. You had a lot of efforts by a desperate cabal to discredit a process that has been deemed by all and sundry, including the AP and UAFC international observers, as Elections Day being a free, fair, and credible day when people went to the polls. However, despite claiming victory and attempting to swear in Granger on several occasions, the AP and AFC, having seen the writing on the wall, they knew all along because they have the same copies of the statements of poll as the PPP. But having the fact that the recount was putting into the public domain the true figures, we have seen a lot of changing narratives, a lot of desperate attempts to derail and discredit a process that they themselves praised initially. Like I said, we're on the home stretch, almost to the finish line. 74 boxes, I think, were remaining for today, and I suspect that they have been moving at a good pace so that we can conclude today. Your opening comments, Sanjeev, we were expected to be joined by one of our key agents down at the conference center, Vickram Bharrat, who may give us a perspective, an idea of what is happening down at the conference center. But your initial thought as we get to the end of this process?
It's been a long process indeed. It's been a form of punishment for Guyanese by this government. They have put us through so many hurdles because they wanted to rig the election. That was obvious. And they continue to try. And now it is borderline. If it wasn't so serious, it would be laughable. The reason why we're here, let's not forget, is because Mr. Mingo played magic with the numbers. He came up with fantasy numbers, and it has been fully exposed what he was doing and what he put on that spreadsheet and he read out. And you've seen recordings where he said he took the numbers from the spreadsheet, from the SOPs, and put it onto that spreadsheet, and that has all been proven to be false. And now that it is obvious, as was known by everyone, including APNU, in the days immediately after the election, that they had lost the election. But they don't want to relinquish power anymore. And they're doing everything they can. First, they invented all the dead people. Then they invented all the migrated people. Those have been, as you can see in the press every day and on the PPP Facebook page every day, people are coming forward and saying, well, look, I am here. I don't know what you're talking about. So it establishes that not only did the Commissioner of Police break the law by disclosing that information, it appears he disclosed false, incorrect information. Now we see what is happening is the newest narrative that they wish is that all the documents were not in the ballot boxes, and therefore those votes should not count. Ed, let me tell you the position very clearly. GCOM or no one else can simply disenfranchise people by not counting their votes. The law is very clear on this issue. If the ballots are in fact genuine ballots and they are marked in a way that you can determine the intention of the voter, you have to count the ballot. There is no in-between process to this. Let me give you an example of what I mean. These ballots are printed on paper with several security features, watermarks, latent marks, number codes. It's almost like currency, like money. It's in fact printed by a company that prints money. So these security features that are built into these ballots are easily discernible. Nobody could reproduce this. So you have to go, you have to have the light, you have to have the magnifying glass, you have to have the various things. And you determine that these are in fact genuine ballot papers. When you look at the ballot, you will see where the X is put next to which party, and you could discern what the intention of the person is. The only thing that you could do to discard that ballot once it is marked is if the person marks several parties on the same ballot, it is not clear who the person has voted for, or they have in some way defaced the ballot. Other than that, you have to allow it. And now it must have the stamp or a part of the stamp. And as long as it has the poll stamp on it, or I mean, even if it's a bit smudged, all of that, as long as it has to be counted. What has been happening and what they are trying to say now, they don't know where it is. But we've seen very clearly, we've seen it publicly circulated by a man who is willing to put his name to it, that they were told that last minute instructions were that this was not to be put in the ballot boxes. And they were to put it separately and send it to GCOM, which they did. The counter to that, which we saw from what GCOM's press release is indicating, is unnamed persons who do not want to be identified, are saying that that's not true. Now, if you read the Kaichur News today, Kaichur News was very clear. Kaichur News said they have asked the PRO and board of GCOM on several occasions, who are the persons that have come forward to say this and what it is that they are saying. And what statement is it that they are alleged to have made? But we don't see that. GCOM is not furnishing that information. But the person who said, this is what we were told, it's more than one person. They said it openly and they put their name to it. There was someone who said it on Facebook. There was another one who said it in a letter that was circulated everywhere. So remember, these are Mingo's officers in Region 4 giving that same instruction at the last minute, do not do this. But you see, all of that, Ed, is a red herring. The ballots are in the ballot box. They were secure, and they have been secure since the day of election. The ballots have been counted. The ballots have the security features, and they have the poll stamp on it. The ballots have to be counted. You can't take away a citizen's right to ballot, their expression at an election, by what a third party does, a government official, a GCOM official. You can't take it away because of that. That narrative that is being created, Ed, is dangerous. It is created for one purpose only: to incite their base and their supporters that they are being robbed, and to incite them to do things that they should not be doing. We saw Nagamutu going on some Facebook interview he was doing with some person who is a journalist or may not be a journalist, whatever it is. But he was saying that if it's not declared fraudulent by GCOM, there will be civil unrest. These are not subtle. These are direct cause for violence if they don't get what they want. And it's an unfortunate situation, because it is the Mingo's fraud while we're here. But they're inventing every sort of discrepancy that you can imagine as a reason to disenfranchise the citizens, including their own supporters, including this morning, they were saying only 75,000 of the votes would be acceptable to them. So that means about 400,000 or just under 400,000 votes that will be discarded. So they're saying to their supporters, we don't want your votes. We don't care what you voted. We want to do this all over again. Well, what makes them think that they will do any better this time around? Why would they want to do this? The people have spoken, and they should do the honorable thing and leave office.
Vickram, good morning and welcome to the program.
Good morning, Eddie. Thanks. Morning, Sanjeev.
Morning, Vickram. I see you all masked up.
Yes. Day 33, day 33 at the
Day
convention
33.
center.
33. Hopefully, there is no
Final day,
34 required.
of the count. Vickram, you on the ground there from the very inception of this recount, and you've been tracking what is happening there. Give us a sense of how things are going this morning. I understand just 73 boxes were remaining at the start of today. In terms of the pace of the count and what is going on there.
Actually, at the starting of today, there were 72 boxes remaining, all East Coast boxes. That is the upper East Coast and more going back to Cane Grove, Strathaven area. For today so far, we have already counted 21 boxes, and the 12 is at the stations. So it means that we are there about 40 and thereabouts remaining. We we would estimate maybe around 4 or 5 o'clock this afternoon that there will be a conclusion of the counting of the 2,339 boxes, which started on the 6th of May, some 33 days ago.
In terms of issues, we all know. I think the nation has known by now that one of the major issues there are a number of baseless allegations of irregularities with absolutely no evidence being presented, primarily by the APNU AFC, and more so, they make these objections and these allegations um, with boxes that emanate from the PPP's stronghold. Have we seen an increase in those baseless allegations maybe today that we're now heading to the very end?
Let me say, Eddie, that this is the very election that the AP and UAFC claimed that they won, and they were willing to sign in David Granger as president a few days after the elections on March 2nd. And then we have seen a complete turn of events where their agents were showing up at stations with serial numbers of people who they claim are dead or are out of the country or out of the jurisdiction. We have managed to find most of these people. This morning, we have found a few that they objected to at around 8:30 this morning. We have already found a few persons who they claim that were dead. So, as you mentioned, these allegations, this narrative that is trying to push is all baseless. It lacks credibility. There is no evidence provided. As Sanjeev said, it's just them trying to comfort their base and at the same time mislead their base also. It is about time that they accept that they would have lost the election and let us move on as a country. Because what their actions are doing right now, it is fracturing our society even further. And that is something that we cannot afford at this point in time. We need a period of reconciliation. We need them to accept the decision and accept that they're willing to work with the new government so that Guyana could move forward. That is what we need right now. Because the allegations that they have been making through their agents are totally false, totally baseless. As I mentioned, no evidence can be provided.
Um, Sanjeev, you touched on a very important point, and I want to share this photo that the APNU AFC published on their Facebook page. I want the nation to see, including their own supporters, um, what this desperate cabal is capable of. So they're saying summary of votes from the ballot boxes without irregularities. A total of 77,252 votes. That is all they're saying that is credible. So they're saying out of region 10, out of region 8, 9, region 8, region 7, even the regions that they won, they are claiming that votes in those regions are not credible. And if you look closely, you will see places like region 10, places like region 7 and region 8, where they got some votes, where they won those regions, they seem somehow hell-bent on accepting all of those. But the other regions where they lost, they're trying to discredit the votes. The issue is what we're seeing is that the APNU AFC seems willing, like you said, Sanjeev, to even throw out their own supporters. I mean, over 400,000 votes, they're somehow trying to tell the people of this country that somehow you were involved in some sort of fraud when you voted.
Well,
They
Ed,
got over 200,000 votes in the elections. So they're saying maybe 160,000 thereabout of their own supporters were involved in fraud.
Ed, the strangest thing I found about that was they decided which 75,000 was acceptable. And unsurprisingly, of the votes that they find acceptable, they would win the election 44,000 votes and the PVP 31,000 votes. So why are we bothering to have an election? They would just pick any number they want, which is what Mingo was doing. And they would too. And I cannot imagine that their supporters as Guyanese citizens will be fooled by that nonsense. They have just decided that 75,000 votes are alone to be. And you notice what has happened, Ed. We started from a position that we have won, and if you have a problem, go to the courts. We went to the courts. We had what they were doing stopped. We had it declared illegal. Then we go to the next stage. They were trying to swear, as Vickram said, they were trying to swear in Grange on 2 different occasions. That didn't happen. Then came the public pressure, then came CARICOM, then they agreed to the recount. They delayed the recount for an entire month. The people came here, the CARICOM team came here, and GCOM was going around in circles, and then they filed a court action, which had the effect of stymieing the process. The CARICOM officials left. We are grateful they returned to our shores and they have come to observe what is going on. But then what happens and what is happening? As soon as the recount started, it became evident what was being revealed. All the other 9 regions have revealed numbers identical, materially identical to the previous declarations. And it is showing that the PPP has won the same amount of votes we've been alleging. But then Region 4 was there. And all of the boxes that Mr. Mingo did on the spreadsheet and his fantasy numbers start to be exposed. So panic set in because the leadership of APNU had deceived their supporters. So now when they were telling everyone that these figures were in fact right, it was being proven to them in the clear light of day, on television and on radio and on Facebook, that it was not so. So they started another narrative that people were dead. Cathy Hughes came and said there wasn't any claims and objection period. When she was confronted about it, literally 4 minutes later, she said it must be the mask. She said there was a clear. I mean, the lying is childish and stupid. Then came the other part about it. They said people were dead. Then it became exposed that those people who they were referring to are not marked as having voted. Then came the migrated numbers, and those numbers started to reveal the same thing, that those numbers those people didn't vote. So then they upped the numbers they were calling. Instead of it being 40 and 50, where they were only identifying 1 or 2, they started calling more than 100 numbers of identifying persons. So they would have a few in it. The chairwoman said that they must establish it. He who asserts must prove. They then wrote a list to the chairwoman, which we believe she was incorrect to hand over to the Commissioner of Police because she shouldn't be investigating. That's their job. But the Commissioner of Police came back with only 172 names, of which Kaichor News alone has debunked 30 odd. We have done the same, approximately the same number, and we have persons, Sabrok News and other media houses, newsroom, are identifying persons as well. So that list is clearly not accurate and it is defective. And for us to have a foolish explanation that people have come into the country through backtrack, that is nonsense. The record is simply not accurate. Now we have another list of names of about 200. Again, that is being debunked. Again, the people on those lists are coming forward and saying, we are in fact here. Then we come onto the position of the ballot boxes. As you would have noticed, what has happened since that has happened is they have given up all the other objections because they have been throwing, it's like throwing mud at a wall until you figure out which one sticks. And what they're now done is they believe that this is the one that will stick. And they've taken it to these ridiculous lengths of how they're calculating how the votes are to be disregarded. But Ed, this is a recount. This is not a verification exercise. This is not a determination of the other issues. This is a recount. All their job is to do is to recount the ballots. And they cannot disenfranchise people as long as those ballots are, as I explained, the genuine ballots of GCOM, and they are marked to reflect the intention of the voter. Anything else is for the court. And GCOM can't choose to take those ballots, like the 29 boxes, and say they will decide to do. What are they going to decide to do? They can't decide to go outside of the law. They can't decide to disenfranchise those people. They can't decide that they will not count it. Those things are for them to take that action. That is malfeasance. Public officers can't act in a willy-nilly manner. They must have justification for what they're doing. They must act reasonably and within their statutory powers. They can't arrogate onto themselves an authority they don't hold. And they certainly cannot take away the most fundamental right of a democratic state from the citizens. How could you take away the people's vote? They didn't do anything wrong. Whatever is the situation, here's what we have said very clearly, and what has been, what the gentleman who published his letter said is that they were told to do this. Now, if GCOM disputes it, a court has to decide that, because you have to decide which one of the two versions of evidence you want to accept. GCOM is not a court and can't do it. And GCOM has no basis for disenfranchising, because GCOM has this SOP, and those SOPs match those numbers that are in the ballot boxes. And mind you, one of the things about SOPs which we have forgotten in this discussion is that when Mingo was playing bingo, Apple said that it matched their SOPs, but they won't show us these SOPs. And I told you before, we are never going to see them. Now that this has all happened, they have upped this rhetoric to simply say that these people cannot be involved. So more than about 400,000 people who went and voted on election day. APNU's position is, we don't need your vote to be considered. Whether you voted for us or not, we don't care. We have chosen out of this lot 75,000. You didn't make the cut. You could have stayed home that day. Don't bother to support us. That's the effective message of what they're doing. But you see, Ed, it is a transparent effort to keep feeling around until you find something. And every time it is debunked, as this was debunked, as to why these events occurred, then they run on to something else. This can't be an indication of fraud. No political party ran this election. This election was conducted by GCOM. And in Region 4, where we have these problems and continue to have the problems, it was done by Mingo and his staff. Make no mistake about that. This was entirely the workings of Mr. Mingo.
I want to bring in Vic here because I know, Vic, you have to run again just now because of your schedule there. Having listened to Sanjeev and being on the ground, your thoughts on the entire scheme, because you will know more than us. You're on the ground, that how they're treating with these allegations. And Sanjeev made the point that it's like throwing mud at a wall, hoping that something sticks.
Let me echo the same sentiments as Sanjeev did. This is not a forensic audit. It is not an audit of the votes that were cast on March 2nd. It is a recount process. So once the recount process entails counting the votes, the ballots that were cast on March 2nd. what GCOM and the APNU has been pushing for since this exercise started, and which created the delay that we're into day 33 now, and we couldn't finish in the deadline of 25, is that they were trying to push it into a semi-audit state rather than doing a recount, where you got to examine counterfoils, where you got to examine ticks on lists, and a lot of presiding officers, what they did on election night, which should not have been done, is that they collected back the lists that were given to the polling agents in the morning. Those lists were supposed to be the property of the respective political parties and were not supposed to be collected back by GCOM. So what you find is that in some boxes now you will have 3 or 4 ticked lists by different people. So how do you now determine which one is the presiding officer list? A polling agent could go to the washroom, could miss a few names, and then APNU make objections that, okay, these names were not ticked, or these people were out of the country. So there's a human error in that, which we cannot take into consideration to discredit this process. This is a recount of the ballots. As you mentioned also, with regards to the boxes on the East Coast, this is not the fault of any political party that contested the election. This is not the fault of any of the elector who would have casted a ballot in that area. This is GCOM's responsibility. We heard that the POs were given different instructions at the last minute not to put certain documents into the ballot box, but to hand it over to the deputy returning officers. So these documents are not missing. These documents must or should be in the possession of GCOM. GCOM is the sole authority that conducts an election in Guyana. These documents were given by the presiding officer to the deputy returning officers, who then report to Mingo, who is the returning officer, and then to the CEO, deputy CEO, CEO. So these documents must be in possession of GCOM. So there is no way that voters can be discredited because of this act by a few of the GCOM staff on election day. People should not be disenfranchised or should not lose that right of their ballot being counted. As it is now, the commission is meeting and on a position or a decision of the commission sometime during the course of the day. But as it is now, the commission is still in a meeting. Thank you, Eddie.
Thanks, Vic. Thanks for joining us. Sanjeev, we'll continue. We have probably about 2 minutes or so to go. If you can stick around, Vic, would be fine.
Okay.
But you made a very interesting point there, Vickram. The fact of the matter is, what the returning officer, the presiding officers were told, that the verdict is still out there. You have one deputy returning officer. You have a number of presiding officers who are saying that they were instructed to send those documents to the returning officer. You also made a point that the tick list, there is some disparity because someone may have exited for a short period or whatever. This matter can be easily solved. All the parties, the agents, as well as the GCOM staff on elections day sat at the end of voting when the polls were closed, and they counted the votes, and they all agree on the votes that were cast for each political party in each polling station. And they prepared and signed together a statement of poll. If there is any concern with documents missing, GCOM has in its possession a copy of that statement of poll. All they need to do is to compare the statement of poll and the statement of recount, and I think the matter is fixed. But that is not happening because you have the Myers and Lowenfield and Alexanders there who are pushing a particular agenda, having recognized that the truth behind the vote is out. And the Guyanese people have seen for themselves on the cameras that the People's Progressive Party Civic won the election. So they're trying to throw in some spun in the works, hoping that something will stick. But I think, in my view, this matter could be, and I am no expert in GCOM, but this is a layman's perspective, that all you need to do is to look at the document you all agreed to on elections night, their only, APNU's only response to that may be that stupid, crazy, foolish position taken by James Bond that their polling agents were all, these are people who are their candidates and their supporters, were all somehow involved in some criminal collusion with the PPP. So the matter can be simply and easily solved.
Ed,
I agree with you totally.
sorry, Vikram, but Ed, the position is very simple. What has happened, make no mistake, has been an entire campaign by APNU to create chaos, to obfuscate the truth, to conceal their actions, and to hang on to power by any means necessary. That has been happening since the no confidence motion. But you know, the whole saying is you could only go so much, moon could only run. And that is what is happening. Because what has happened time after time, they keep getting caught out. They keep being forced into a direction. But now it's become blatant. They're turning on their scrutineers, their supporters, they're turning on everyone because they do not care. They simply want to remain in power. But James Bond,
an agenda for a small cabal, Sanjeev.
and they're the only ones that would. James Bond is saying all of the persons who they sent into those polling stations were bought out. Those people gave up their day. They went to training. They went and they did a job fairly, signed their names to it. And they were saying, by the way, that they won based on that, you know. They were saying that they won the election and Granger should be sworn in. But they have been changing and doing everything they can, because what it is now is a naked attempt to mislead their supporters and to incite their supporters to civil unrest. That is their only hope now, because it has been laid bare. Everyone knows that the PPP won this election, but now it is being laid bare. They have no more excuses. They have the rope run out. There's nothing left. So what are they going to do? They up the ante of the lies. And you can see on Facebook today, where the common message seems to be that we should have a new election. So an entire nation must have a do-over. We're not children. It doesn't operate that way. We can't do that unless GCOM declares, and GCOM does not have the power. There is no legal authority in GCOM for them to mark themselves and say that we didn't do a proper election. It is important that we recognize that. GCOM has got to declare a winner. And they can't do anything but count ballots to declare a winner. But all that they're trying to do, they must report for that.
But this, Sanjeev, you made the point there of this do-over. Both, well, all three of us I know are from the countryside. And we know as kids you playing cricket, there's always this one bully, this one cheater in the set. And whenever he gets out, he'll say, that's a false, let's start over the game. You know, and that is exactly what APNU is trying to do. They have lost.
Pick up his bat and ball and he leaves.
Yeah, they decide, let us start over the game. The game, we didn't get the desired results, so let us start over the game. You cannot do that. You cannot put a nation through that just because you are not satisfied. You fail to provide services to the people. You fail to deliver on your promises that you made. And the nation decided, majority of the people of this country decided that you have had enough of your lies, your misinformation, your broken promises, and we are going to choose a political party that has always, for 23 years, delivered on its promises. They chose the PPPC to go back into power, to represent them, and to provide services to them. It is as simple as that. Vic?
It's actually an act of desperation. I heard James Bond condemning the APNU.
We're getting some difficulty with Vic's
audio. That's the worst thing you can do. Some of those people who give up the entire day, who work tirelessly on election day, but it's just because the results did not favor them. They now want to discredit those people. As you mentioned, we have the SOPs. Everybody have the SOPs. We did a compilation of all the SOPs. We know who are the presiding officer, who are the new agents. And in all the stations in Region 4, there was an AP and UFC agent. So I'm sure they have the SOPs. But as Sanjeev mentioned, we will never see those. We will never see these documents. So I believe it is the sad reality of them giving up the good life that they were enjoying by themselves. The cabal was enjoying by themselves. It's the sad reality of giving up that and accepting defeat and walk away. So they are trying now to mislead their supporters and to put a false sense of hope into them that we didn't lose the election. But they need to act, they're leaders, they need to act, they have a constituency, they have a following. They need to be responsible at this period of time and to show leadership to their base, because their base has been lacking leadership for a while now.
Gentlemen, I want to thank you very much for joining me this morning. Of course, we could have gone on much longer, but because of time, we have to wrap this up here. But we're going to be back at 1 p.m. where we're going to continue to have this discussion to show that the reality is that the APNU has lost the elections, and it is a clear attempt that they are not prepared to give up power, despite if it means they have to thwart the will of the majority of the Guyanese people. But quickly before we go, I just want to mention, Sanjeev, you and I both know, I think Vickram, you're aware too, GCOM has no power to investigate. The fact of the matter is there's a push to investigate, all in the effort to discredit the elections. If GCOM intends to investigate any claims or allegations of irregularities or fraud, then the best starting point for them is the hundreds of cases of fraud that are coming out from boxes with Mingo. But the point is GCOM has no jurisdiction to do that. Thanks, gentlemen. Have a good rest of the day. Sanjeev, you were going to...
Take good care. Take good care, Vickram. Be safe.
Good. Thank you. Thank you.
Good, buddy.